If you have been listening to this podcast for some time, then you'll probably know that I like to uncover how storytelling can help drive predictable business growth, especially in the B2B space. Having looked at this for a while, it's been my observation that there are times when businesses can get in their own way of doing storytelling right. These include things like complexity is necessary because a good story has to be layered with stuff. Why? Because a simple one is just too simple to be effective. But the truth isn't enough, and their stories, by extension, are too ordinary to be meaningful. Another one, they fear talking about challenges they face, they fear being vulnerable. Yet, are stories without challenges stories at all in the first place? A story that ends with an economic benefit makes for a not so great ending. Because, in my opinion, what users really want to know is how their personal lives will change. And here's the last one, they hide behind the corporate veil. Yet people don't care about companies, they care more about people. So, how can we address these issues? Given his experiences, our guest has some answers, and we'll dive into that in a moment. Hello, and welcome to the Predictable B2B Success Podcast, brought to you by Sproutwith.com. I'm Vinay Koshy, and our guest is Anthony Butler. Anthony, you are the founder of the digital marketing agency Can Do Ideas, now Primal Storytelling, and the author of the international bestseller, Primal Storytelling, Marketing for Humans. Anthony, I believe you've been helping businesses grow since 2008, and you've graduated from the United States Military Academy at West Point and the U.S. Army Ranger School. You're a combat veteran, commanded an infantry company in Iraq during the invasion of Baghdad. Now, I believe in 2019, your story with the agency took a bit of a turn. I'm curious, can you tell us what happened and how primal storytelling came to be?
I hate telling this story. I was running my agency. We're a few years in and doing really well. And I get a call from a CEO in the IT industry. And it was an unfortunate call. They're firing us. They're moving on. And the thing about the call, I think that was really ironic was he was really apologetic. He's, the work is good. You guys are professional. It's on time. He's like, but it's not moving the needle. We're not getting ROI on the spend. And that was a big wake up call just because there's a giant doomsday pit full of agencies that went out of business because they couldn't get results. Agencies have to get results. That's the bottom line. And so for me, I was just shocked. And I went through this whole kind of self examination, like what happened? And then comparing the content and the work that we were doing for them to other clients that were getting results, that were moving the needle. And at first I couldn't really see it. I couldn't figure out like what was the heart of it. And it's funny, you mentioned something during the intro that really matters for this conversation. And you're talking about how a lot of brands, they'll hide behind the corporate veil. And no one cares about the company, but they care about people. And that's the heart of it. That's why the subtitle of the book is Marketing for Humans, because what we had forgotten and what we were doing was we were writing for the search engines. We were blogging to blog. We were posting on social media to post, but it didn't have heart. It didn't have a connection. It didn't have any real emotional drive behind it. And when you start to think of who are you marketing to, and you deeply think of them as people and human beings, what you start to realize is that if we don't put a face on the marketing and we don't have a heart with it, it makes it really hard to get good results, especially on the content marketing side. With ads, 99% of ads have people in them anyway, right? Like, especially video type ads, rarely they not. But when you talk about written content, where maybe you're doing lead magnets, you're doing email follow-ups and landing pages and forms and all of that normal stuff, it's really easy to leave out the people part, to leave out the storytelling part, and to just fall into the trap of providing data, providing information. So that's how we got started. And that wake up call, it led me to start thinking deeply about why does some content perform and some content doesn't. And what I found was most of the time, it has to do with personality and connection. And as I started researching for the book, like, why do things go viral? Like, why is some content really sticky with people? And I stumbled on this idea of evolutionary psychology. And the idea behind evolutionary psychology is really simple, is that humans have the vestiges of urges left inside of us. So an instinct, the geese, they fly south for winter. Okay. They don't go east. They don't go west. They don't go on vacation to Hawaii. They fly south. Squirrels gather nuts. Bears hibernate. Well, with people, we have free will. We can choose to do whatever we like, right? But that doesn't mean we don't still have the vestiges of our instincts. So we still want connection with our tribe. We still need a connection of a family and friends. The meaning behind the things that we buy is very important to us. It's why, as an example, look at the car industry. There's enormous, basically an infinite gulf between the cheapest car you can buy and the most expensive car, right? You can buy a car for $500 or $5 million. And they both provide transportation, but the signal that purchase sends to our tribe and how it makes us feel, that's the difference. The clothes that we wear, all of the decisions that we make in our life, they're emotionally driven. And once as a marketer, you start to really understand what are these primal emotions, what are the primal urges, and connect those back to your best fit audience, it makes it much easier to create content that's going to move the needle, that's going to do well, that's going to have heart, that's going to connect. So that's what the book is about and how it came about. That makes sense.
Certainly. And I'd love to dive into that a bit more, but I'm also curious, what would you say would be your personal area of strength?
In terms of content,
No, just your personal area of strength for you personally.
me personally, the name of my company is Can Do Ideas. I think
Okay.
I'm very creative. Have enormous amount of experience in connecting a lot of seemingly disconnected ideas together into a coherent mesh that helps companies. That's what I do. And I think, and that helps me be a good strategist. I would say a large portion of the engagements that I do with companies is just helping them decide like what content they should produce, like what could they produce, what kinds of things that would help them get to the next level with lead generation and their online presence.
So in that area of strength, what would you say is something that businesses don't know but should?
Yeah, I think a lot of businesses, they are approaching content with a fly by night attitude, very shoot from the hip. They're not planning long term and they're thinking about volume over quality. And I see it all the time is that, oh, we got to be part of the conversation. We need to post on Twitter 10 times a day, Facebook 5 times a day, and on LinkedIn 3 times a day. It's like, do you really? Or maybe they want to blog 3 times a week or twice a week or once a week or whatever. And it has to be 750 words to 1,200 words. You know what? I can show you enormous number of examples of very long form content on multiple different social media channels that's good and that pulls people in and that people actually consume. But it's funny. I have a team and they do some promotion stuff on LinkedIn and we send long form messages on LinkedIn to people. And I had this guy who's from a lead generation company say, oh, this message could never work. It's too long. And I just wrote him back a smiley face laughing. I was like, you know what? It works and it's been tested and it's not a fly by night strategy. It's a strategy that we came up with when we tested it. And you know what? People will read and consume long form content if it's relevant for them and if they find it entertaining and interesting and informative and it's got heart.
Mm.
Okay. Like, how do you think someone consumes every single episode of Game of Thrones over multiple seasons? They get drawn into the story, right? You can do the same thing with your marketing. When you start to think long term and you add value to clientele, if you think of your content, think of it over, instead of a course of a few weeks, think of it over a course of an entire year. And think of it like a series where that entire series has an overall theme. It's got some structure to it. And then each episode has a beginning, middle, and end. Okay. You can do the same thing with corporate content. And I'm not saying that you have to write the great American novel or, you're going to produce a movie. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is when you pick themes. So I'll give you an example. I was working with a very large industrial plant in Long Island, New York, a manufacturer. They create all kinds of stuff for aerospace and railroads and robots and medical devices, this kind of stuff, manufacturing plant. And they came up with a leadership program for mechanical engineers. And so they got this whole resource center, mechanical engineers who are just getting out of college. They want to learn more about leadership. They can go there, consume an enormous amount of really valuable content, learn some good skills that will help them in their career from a vendor, from someone that they don't really know that well. And that leadership content, it's something way out of the box for the manufacturer, it has nothing to do with their business, but it's a value add and it's a long-term theme for the client and the end client. That makes sense.
Really?
I think it's really important for brands just to think bigger and more about the kinds of content that they create.
Certainly. For a lot of brands, especially in the B2B space and perhaps in the technology space, there tends to be a lot of jargon and inside industry knowledge that they perhaps put out in their content. I don't think anyone would necessarily disagree with the fact that storytelling is important, but would you say that they not try to make things difficult intentionally, but because they're so caught up in that mind space of dealing with technicalities of the way they do, that by very nature of that fact, it almost gets fed into the kind of content that they produce, which is fairly complex for the average person?
Yeah. So what happens is brands, they get caught up in talking about themselves and what they do rather than helping the client and talking in a way that connects with the client. And it's like me, I'm a marketer, I'm a storyteller. But interesting enough, on every single social media channel I have, the content that I produce about how to do the thing, it gets a fraction of the engagement that versus my personal life and things that I'm doing. I'm hiking backcountry in Montana and I'm going to a Brazilian jiu-jitsu tournament and I'm coaching my team. And I post stuff about that. I post stuff about my kids. And even on business sites, those posts that have a personal touch to them, and maybe they're tied into some sort of business lesson or something, but those posts, they do far better than the straight business kind of posts. And what the challenge is that a lot of brands are scared to get out of the box and they think, oh, I just got to tell them what I do. That's how I'm going to connect. Oh, this is how you fix the widget. This is how you do it. That's not it. That's not it. That's not it. It doesn't connect.
Mm. And it is, I guess, the other fear, the fact that their day-to-day experiences are a little too mundane for the average person or who reads or listens to their content.
I'm not certain what you mean by mundane, but you have to ask the question is like, why would someone consume the content that you're producing? Okay. And when we start to think about the why, that ties into, all right, what are we actually producing? If you take a cross section of brands that are on Twitter as an example, how many of them are reposting the news of the day or they're sharing pithy quotes? If I see another quote from a brand, I just want to throw up. I want to vomit. It's just ridiculous. We have enough quotes in the world, right? The reason they're doing that is they don't know what to produce to help themselves on that channel. Okay. Rather than going deep, providing insight in some way. And they'll say, we produce nuts and bolts. We don't have any insight we can produce. And no one cares about how the nuts and bolts. We're just selling bolts. Okay. It's commodity. And guess what? Who's your audience? What could you produce that doesn't have anything to do with what you do that would connect with them As an example, I mentioned own a Brazilian jiu-jitsu school and I teach jiu-jitsu, black belt. I've been training for over 20 years. Okay. I get lots of students who come in and they're in their 30s, maybe even their 40s or 50s. And maybe they've done a sport, maybe they haven't. Maybe they used to be an athlete, maybe they haven't. And some of them, they ask me all kinds of questions about mindset, about being an athlete, about lifting weights, about losing weight, all of these things that we struggle with that have nothing to do with Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Okay. And it's often I will produce something for that group that might just be about, hey, this is how you create a habit and you can come to class and like train because it takes a long time to get a black belt in Jiu Jitsu, years and years. Okay. It's not unusual for someone to take 12 years or more to get a black belt. So it takes a lot of effort over a really long period of time. So you've got to be consistent. And consistency is one of the hardest things for people. As a coach, one of the things that I'm doing is I'm encouraging students to come to class, not miss. If you're traveling, visit somewhere. If you can't come to class, do something at home, watch a video, exercise a little bit. And the things that have nothing to do with jujitsu, I create connections with my students. They're friends. And it's the same thing with any business, whether it's jujitsu or a manufacturing plant or a law firm, it doesn't matter. E-commerce brands have an enormous opportunity just to choose a category that is important to their clients and produce content about it, produce something really valuable. My real goal with Primal Storytelling is just to drive out bland corporate content on the internet. Go to a cross section of big brand websites and you're like, oh my God, who would read this? It's a cure for insomnia. And they're producing it because they want SEO and they're trying to write something for Google, for the search engine. Guess what? It's going to change. No one's going to read what you want. Yeah, it's going to get indexed. Maybe you'll rise to the top. Maybe you won't. But when you add stories and you add heart, then that is going to be as good or better for SEO long term. So that's where I'm headed with it. And that's what I'm trying to beat the drum, get people going.
Brilliant. Now, and we're probably aware that there's a fair few advocates for storytelling. Perhaps Donald Miller is perhaps one of the better known ones. What is different about primal storytelling as opposed to what other advocates talk about?
Yeah. So primal storytelling is a system and it's a step-by-step from end to end business system. And the way I designed it was like, okay, I'm a blue collar guy. I was an instrument for a really long time. So I need something simple that I can implement, that I can follow, and then I can easily teach to someone. And so what this is, it's a system. You just start at the beginning and you move all the way to the end and plan out your content using the formats, the structures. And you go to the website, I got some templates and things you can get to help you plan it all out. And then what happens is you're going to test and we're going to get data and we're going to learn from what is working and what's not working. And so that over the long term, you're going to win on social media. You're going to win on your website with organic traffic. And then once you have good storylines that are really working, it will help your ad spend if you're doing digital ads. Maybe you're advertising on social media or on Outbrain or something like that. If you're spending a lot on advertising, one of the most important things you can do is get efficiency from the ads. And what I can tell you is adding some heart into the ads, adding some emotional content that's really focused on the primal urges. That's how you can really move the needle. Okay. And I actually have a couple case studies in there. I have one of an ad campaign that we did. And for $300, we got over 100,000 likes, shares, reactions, views, just for $300. And like, how do you do that? Is you connect in a way that encourages the audience to interact and in a really nice way. So yeah, that's the Sleeping Baby campaign. It's in the book. And then I actually have a free gift that I offer anyone who watches this podcast. They can download some case studies and some videos that for free.
We'll include a link to that in the show notes, but could you elaborate on the system and give us an idea of what it encompasses and how it works?
Yeah, sure. System's got three major parts. So step one is we're looking at the tribe. And most marketers are familiar with setting up an avatar or a persona. Okay. But this is a little deeper than that. And we want to do is we want to look at what are the demographics of the best client. Okay. Who are they as people? Not just like the industry and the job title. That's not nearly enough. Okay. We want age ranges. Where are they from? What's their socioeconomics? What do we know about them? And then we want to look even deeper. We want to start to figure out what are the psychographics around this audience. So when I say psychographics, what I mean is, what are their hopes? What are their dreams? What are their fears about doing business with you? Okay. If you can figure that out, that can go a long way to helping you overcome their fear and resistance early on in the sales process. Okay. And once you really understand who that audience is, that makes the whole rest of the process much easier. Now, let me tell you what it's not. We cannot, in today's age, try to market to everybody. It's the biggest mistake I see. Is, oh, we have 20 segments of people that we can market to. So, okay, you probably have 20 segments that might buy from you, but who's the best fit? Because very few brands, unless you're a multi-billion-dollar company, have the resources and the people and the processes to market to 20 plus segments. They just don't have it. Okay. For most brands, I would say 3 to 5 is probably the max that you're going to be able to really reach out to. And when you narrow down, and I had a conversation with a marketing consultant, and she was helping set the strategy for this makeup brand. And so she opens up the brief they gave her and it looks in there. Who are you marketing to? And it's like, women over the age of 25 with skin. Now think about that. I was like, okay. And we had a good laugh. It was like, okay, that's a few billion people, right? It's just too wide. It's too broad. It doesn't tell you anything about the actual market. Okay. Because maybe you do have a broad base of clients, but the 80-20 rule absolutely applies to your business. And there's probably a 20% segment that are more profitable, that are easier to work with, that you love to work with, that are a really good fit. Maybe they're easy to really make happy. And so they're giving you more referrals and that kind of thing. Once you narrow it down, then you move on to the second part is, so we understand the psychographics. We understand who they are. Now we're looking at what are the likely primal urges and primal emotions that we could use as a lens to connect with them through. Okay. And what I want to do is I want to find what's that emotional connection where if I could connect with someone over a commonality and give us something in common as people, because you know what? We want to do business with people we like. We want to do business with people that we have a connection with. And if you can form that bond, it makes it much easier. So think about insurance. Okay. What's the least sexiest product out there, right? What's harder to market than insurance? Like every insurance company sells about the same thing, right? Maybe this one has a little bit different than that, but pretty much the same thing. Who dominates insurance? Who can you think of? Like when you think of insurance companies, how many insurance companies can you think of? And now I'm asking you, have you ever heard of the Geico Gecko? You probably have, right? Like, why is that so memorable? Because it's a personification of the brand. And they try to connect this happy little character that they made up. Some smart agency came up with the gecko. And they're like, you know what? Let's give him some human characteristics. Let's make him funny and quirky, but we're still selling insurance. All right. Can you remember the tagline for Geico? You probably can. But my point being is, it doesn't matter what you're selling. You can still connect on an emotional level, even for something as boring and dry as insurance. Okay. Then the third part of the formula is story. And when I talk about story, I'm not talking about Stephen King novels and Harry Potter. It's not what we're talking about. You're not trying to write the great fiction. What we're trying to do is we're trying to use human stories that connect, and you think of the client as the character and they're interacting with you and you're taking on voice in a story. So maybe you're an ally or a mentor. Most of the time I'm working as an ally and a mentor. So I have certification clients. I have people that are learning primal storytelling from me. or I'm allying with them and I'm helping them build out a content system. Okay. And whatever strategy that you take and like the position of you with the client just depends on your business. And then what I'm doing is I'm connecting with them through storylines. And I outlined 4 very simple stories that every brand can tell. The origin story, like how did you get in business? Where did you come from? What was that startup story that you had? Everyone had the struggle, right? Those stories are great. People love that. It's why in the Marvel universe, the origin story, where the superheroes came from, are so popular. Those are some of the most popular and best performing movies. It's like when the superhero got started, because we identify with people's beginnings. And actually, I think I read your story on your website on how you got started telling a story and trying to raise some money. It's a really good story. It's like why it's there. And I bet that story has done really well for you. That's your origin story. And it's a great one. It's really good to connect with. It puts humanity on what you're trying to accomplish in a big way. It's well done. I rang with it. And I could see how, whether you knew about Tony's idea of origin stories or not, you just instinctively knew that's why you were successful, was that story. And that's just where it came from. So then the next part, and I talk about this is on your website, is what's the transformation story? Okay. How are we helping people? What was it like before they worked with you? What was it like when they worked with you? And what was that result, that transformation that occurred afterwards? And the better the transformation, the more people connect with it. It's why the whole weight loss industry is it's designed around before and after pictures. Okay. Tony was 300 pounds before, and now he's got 6-pack abs and he's ready for Olympia. That's what everyone sees. But what we know is that results are emotional. And I think you mentioned it in the introduction. You're like, yeah, if it's a monetary result, that's not nearly as important as the emotional result. What was that transformation? Because that's what people care about, right? That's what they care about. Do you have kids?
I do.
So think about your kids. All right. They're born and they're little babies. And then one day they start walking a little bit, and then they start running around the house and tearing stuff up. And the next thing you know, I'm teaching my 16-year-old how to drive, and he's talking about, I think I could do a donut. Wow. It's like this incredible transformation over 18 years, 20 years, 30 years. We have these same kind of personal transformations, even in B2B, when maybe we're consulting with someone, we're helping them accomplish something that's important to them. Okay. I hate the idea of B2B because it takes the people out of it. B2C, business to consumer, where you're going direct to consumers. Okay, that's great. What in B2B, you're still doing business with people. Businesses never buy anything. People buy things through their businesses. So you're always marketing to humans. It's always somebody that's involved. And so as long as you keep the human side of it in focus, it's way easier to write these stories. Then the third story that I'm always pushing companies to write about is the vision story. What are you trying to accomplish with the business? What's the big idea? But not everyone is Elon Musk and they're trying to make humanity a multi-planetary species with SpaceX. That's an awesome story and it's big. But, what if I'm selling shoes? Maybe I'm just trying to help people not have foot pain. Maybe like with my business, I'm trying to get rid of bland corporate content. I want to help businesses grow. I like working with businesses that I can help, because when they're successful, it feels good for me personally. And I don't do it for the money. I'll take the money. I want the money, but I don't do it for the money, if that makes sense. The money's how we keep score, but it's not what makes us feel good about our business. And then the last part, and this is the one story I think everyone gets wrong. And it's been the hardest for me to really help people understand our value stories. This is where you create content that's more than just about your brand and what you do. It's something that you create that's just for your audience. Okay. Like this podcast. Let's think about this podcast. Okay. I'm guessing you had an ulterior motive in the podcast. You want to connect with an audience and you want to grow your business, right? That's part of it. But 98% of this podcast has nothing to do with your business. It's a gift to the world to help connect with people, right? Yeah. There's lots of ways to do that. And podcast is one really effective way. although there's a lot of podcasts these days, so there's competition. There's lots of other ways. There's lots of other ways you can bring back value. It could be really good emails that are on a topic and a subject that's important to the audience. I was just working with a construction company. Okay. And one of the things they do is they dig septic tanks. Now, can you think of a harder story to tell? You know what? If you live someplace in a rural area and your septic tank fails and there's sewage in your yard, it's like an emotional event. If you haven't been around one of those that have failed, like I have, it's not fun. And these guys come and they save the day. They're like superheroes of septics. And I make a joke out of it, but they're really passionate about doing a good job and getting to people's houses and doing a cleanup and restoring their yard back to a pristine environment when they leave. And they do a great job and they've got a beautiful multi-million-dollar business around that. And it's something, that's why I was saying, like, you can find a story in sewage if you look deep enough. Okay. There's a story there. There really is.
Right. Tell us more, if you would, around primal edges or primal emotions, as you were talking about it. What are the kinds of emotions that we should be trying to tap into? Are they generally positive ones that we should be aiming for that tend to make people laugh, enjoy, if I can use perhaps a broad term?
Yeah. So University of Berkeley, Stanford, and some others, they've identified dozens of different emotions. Okay. And what we find is that rarely does an individual experience a single pure emotion. Emotions are felt in what we think of as gradients. So you have a mix. So, my son is learning how to drive. I'm really excited about him driving. Okay. I'm also scared because 16-year-old boys are not known for being really smart and their brains are in the wrong part of their body. And there's lots of trouble that can come with a young kid learning how to drive. All right. But now he's independent and he's taking the next step. So I feel excited. I feel fearful. I feel proud. It's a lot of different feelings. Okay. What I try to do in the book is narrow down a handful of emotions that are very common that brands can use. And as you mentioned it, there are some emotions that I personally recommend above others. So curiosity is the most used emotion in marketing. So go to any news website and look down at the bottom, the sponsored content, and all of it is clickbait stuff. You shouldn't click on it, but you still do. You're like, Gwyneth Paltrow has a new diet plan and you can lose 65 pounds by the end of next month. You just drink this one juice. And you're like, oh, I don't want to click on that, but you do anyway. It's curiosity. Okay. It's suspense. We have this need to know the great secret of the world. Okay. It's one of the most overused ones, but it works. So curiosity is a big one. I lay out the rest of them kind of step by step, but curiosity, fear is another. Fear of missing out, fear of being left behind, fear of being separated from our tribe, the social signals that we send, that kind of thing. You've got to be very careful with fear and how you use it. If you overdo it, it can really be repellent to people. I didn't include disgust and horror and some of those, but it's funny, since the book has come out and it's gone worldwide, I have people messaging me, oh, I realized I figured out a way I could use horror in my business. I'm like, hey, good for you. But that's not average. That's not most businesses. My dearest advice to the cross section of marketers is stay positive. Polarizing content can definitely work. Okay. You can be polarizing, you can, but you have to understand it can backfire. The same thing with humor. Humor can be an incredible tool and it can also backfire, right? Look what's happening to Bud Light right now. When you think of the campaign that Bud Light was running, in their hearts, it was positive. They wanted to connect with a new audience. When the young lady who was running it, she didn't deeply understand who her market was. She did not know her tribe. She did not understand the market of beer, especially the Bud Light beer. She didn't know anything what she was doing. Okay. So she runs this campaign that is deeply offensive to a large portion of their current clients and doesn't have a way of bridging the gap to a new audience. And as of this recording, they're down 6 billion and they're looking at a 25% loss. They went from being the number one beer brand in America, and they're already down to number two. And the stock was just downgraded for the first time in years after it just had one of its best 2-year periods in the history of the brand. Okay. That's from one campaign that disconnected from the core audience because they did not know who their tribe was. But no matter how you feel about the campaign itself, that's irrelevant. What's relevant is, hey, let's not insult our customers. Let's not be mean to the people who are giving us money. It doesn't matter who your audience is. It's like their audience did not like that message. And so it's important to really understand what those emotions are. Now, when we think of primal urges and think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and at the bottom of that triangle, you've got food, clothing, housing, the things that keep us alive, safety, protection. Now, what all you're going to do is take those basics and then link it with one single thing, tribe. What is the social signal that it sells? So we talk about women in marketing because women make more than 90% of all purchases in America are done by women. Okay. Even in households where there's a man, that's just how it is, right? I go to buy a house. Do I really buy the house or does my wife buy the house? I help write the checks, but she's choosing the house. I could care less, but she's going to pick a good house. And I think that's pretty typical. So what we're looking at is social signals for everything. What's the social signal that we're sending when they do business with us? If they buy from us, what is the signal that it's sending socially? Really, you have to understand it. And then really look at the fears that they might have of doing business with you. If you're in B2B, and I tell this to every one of my B2B clients, during your sales process, you must understand, especially if you're doing like big ticket sales and there's a team on the other side of the table that's got to make this big decision. So maybe you got someone from finance, maybe you got someone from IT, maybe you got, admin, maybe there's some leadership people. They all have different agendas. They all have personal fears around the deal. The IT guy might be thinking, hey, am I getting fired if I hire these guys? Are they going to suck? Are they going to take my job? Okay. Are we going to lose business? What if they don't perform? It's a really big deal.
Certainly. Stories that we should be telling, and I think you touched upon 4 in particular. Are there plots as well that we should be considering in the telling of these stories in order to ensure that they land as intended?
Yeah, there are. And I outline half a dozen plots in the book. Think of the plots like your favorite movies. And so the one example I love to give is because it's easy is Rocky. Okay. When you think of Rocky, that same story structure, we think of it as the underdog. Okay. Everyone loves the underdog. If you look at Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, and Star Wars, those three series of movies, okay, they're all the same series. They all have the exact same story structure down to an unlikely hero goes on to save the world or the universe fighting against a dark evil. Okay. It's the same story. And when you look at Rocky, there's tens of thousands of stories exactly the same. Why does the underdog work in marketing? Because we love to do business with people who try hard, right? And sometimes the giant corporate faceless brand is not nearly as engaging as someone who's right in front of us, who's small. They're the underdog and they're really fighting hard for our business. Okay. That can be a really good one. Another one is life's journey. Okay. Where we think of in this, I see this a lot. I just did a talk for the Montana Tourism Association. I had 500 marketers in a single room. And we're talking about people taking vacation to Montana and the journey these families want to go on. I don't know if you're familiar with Montana in the United States. It's a giant wilderness area. Montana's the size of Europe and there's fewer than 1 million people. So you leave a town and you're out in the middle of nowhere. There's no cell service and there's grizzly bears and all kinds of animals and stuff. And it's just rugged mountains. Okay. People go there to have an experience. They go on the journey. So most people, there's only a couple of, I think 4 airports that are major airports in the whole state. So people fly into one of the airports and then they have to drive somewhere. They might be driving hundreds of miles. And along the way, they're trying to have an adventure. They're trying to see stuff. Maybe they're going fishing or hiking or mountain climbing or whatever. And it's a journey. And that connection, it can have a lot of different connotations for it. People are going on vacation to create an experience for their family. Again, back to that social signal, that primal urge to be part of a tribe.
Brilliant.
I hope that answers the question.
So are there any other plots that we should be aware of?
There's others. I don't think we have time in this.
Fair enough. Okay.
This call. What I can tell you is I listed out half a dozen plots in the book. Look at them all, think deeply, think bigger about your content and which one really can connect. One of those is spirituality. It's another one that some brands can use it and some brands are really turned off by the idea of spirituality. Okay. And I don't necessarily mean in the religious sense, but just a connection with something, sometimes something bigger. Maybe it's with nature. I see that a lot. You'll see some towns that are really beautiful. They'll try to tie in like a spiritual aspect of visiting there. Maybe they're near a beautiful ocean where there's blue waves and lots of sky and sunshine, and it's a spiritual journey for them. Well, you can do it.
Someone listening to this is probably going, that sounds great, Anthony, but it's also a lot of work. Given the pressures that we have to hit our deadlines and the numbers, that could take a lot of time. How can we best utilize our limited resources and be productive at the same time?
So are you asking me, how can we implement the system the easiest?
Given pressures that marketers and businesses as a whole tend to have, it would seem that this would take some time to implement and implement correctly, to get it out there consistently the way it should. Is that the case with implementing your system, or are there things that we could do to ensure that we have this system dialed in correctly and operating the way it should in a shorter period of time as possible?
Yeah. So the best thing you can do is sit down and you can download the templates off the website, provide those for free, and just fill the templates out. Get all the information in one place. And then what I like to do is sketch out an entire year worth of content. Think of the themes. Once you have the tribe sun done, the tribal part of it done, and you understand who you're marketing to, and then you have 3 to 5 emotions that you really want to hit on. You understand what the primary urges and fears are. And then you start looking at different storylines. Okay. Then what you're going to do is just map it out. I go by quarter, and then I break down each month, and then I start breaking down into weekly and big chunks. And I try to get 90 days out. A service that I have is I help companies implement it. We call it a Primal Storytelling Foundation. And it's 4 to 6 week guided program where I help a company just walk them through the entire process. So at the end, they've got a real document that they can use to implement the system and get it going over the long term. But can you do it on your own? Absolutely. The book is laid out so that you can, but it does take some companies time. I would say the one thing that you can do to free up some time is you got to stop doing some of the things that you are doing, which is just being part of the conversation online for the sake of being part of the conversation, and get strategic about what you're creating and start thinking about what is that big impact and like, how can I use it to connect? And I am a big advocate of quality over quantity.
Mhm.
If you can only produce one really high quality blog a month, and that's all you have time for, then that's good. Do that. But don't produce 3 or 4 really crappy 400 word blogs that aren't going to move the needle, because it's just a waste of time. It takes away your time and it doesn't produce a result, whereas the one really good one does.
Given what you're saying, is this just the function of marketing, perhaps content managers or content directors in a business to worry about this whole idea of using primal storytelling, or does it speak perhaps to a wider organizational culture piece as well in order to educate and get people to think?
Yeah, I see lots of sales professionals using the system because they understand that Your sales and marketing, they cross over and we're bringing in leads with stories. And then we're helping move people across the finish line with stories. That just is. I would say for sales and marketing is definitely vital. And the leadership team, as they're promoting a company, maybe they're using social media, maybe their networking is to really be dialed in with, especially their case studies and transformation stories. I would say those are one of the most important set of stories to get dialed in a massive way. And I'm not going to tell you, it's funny. And the origin story, I think, is a great way. And it's an unusual tool that really can connect. And I've had all kinds of people reach out to me after they read my bio and they're like, oh, what an interesting history. It's why I left jujitsu in my bio. Like, why would you leave that in there? It's the fastest growing sport in America. A lot of people know about it. I've been asked so many questions about it. It's just a way of connecting with people.
Hmm.
And it's my favorite thing to do. It's my favorite hobby. Just makes me feel good.
Excellent. And given your experiences with parallel storytelling and implementing it for clients, do you find that there's perhaps a couple of aspects to it that you don't find gets talked about very much? If so, what would they be?
Which doesn't get talked about with primal storytelling.
Yeah, the implementation of it.
Yeah, I think a lot of companies' hesitation in tackling it is I hear, oh, I'm not creative. I can't come up with the right kinds of stories. And I want to challenge that. Everybody's a storyteller. There's just no human who's not a storyteller. You started telling stories since the time you could talk. Okay. Stories is the first thing we learn as kids, right? If you've ever spent any time with a 3 to 5 year old, like their entire day is telling stories. I have a little class I teach, but it's 4 to 6 year olds. And we'll be in there in the middle of class and we're learning to move. And suddenly, out of nowhere, a story will start. I found this bug, but it just goes on and like, and really intricate, really smart. Like, cause kids are just infinitely creative, right? And so everyone's a storyteller. You can do it. If I can do it, anybody can do it. I think that's one big aspect of it is they feel like it's too hard. And what I can tell you is I've created a blueprint. It's not hard. If I can do it, you definitely can. Okay. You are creative enough to create your stories. If you need help, reach out. I can help you, but you can do it. Okay. I think that's the one big fear is that people just, we don't know what stories and we're not creative enough. Or the other one you already mentioned is we don't have time.
Mm.
And the way to get time is to stop doing all the nonsense that you're doing and focus on what's important is putting together really impactful stories that are going to move the needle long term. Okay. If you can only do one thing per quarter, then do one thing per quarter, but make it really good.
Thank you for that. That's lots of food for thought there. To wrap things up, Anthony, if you were listening to this episode, what would you say would be your top takeaway?
But top takeaway is have a system. Not having a strategy is one of the biggest problems because it leads to just wasted time because you feel pressure to publish, to keep the conversation going on your social media channel and not just leave it empty. And so you just feel it, you fill it up with something, pithy quotes, news of the day, whatever. And it's just feeding the noise. There's a billion and a half websites in the world. And what we don't need is just more noise. Add value, create something that's valuable, and your clients will reward you with business. They just will. The companies that are going to win over the next year or two, and it's going to be a hard year or two, are the companies that tell the best stories over and over again. It's just not a one-time thing. It's a system.
And on that note, would you say that purpose-driven companies have stand a better chance than companies that are into production of things or the service implementation of things?
I don't know that purpose-driven companies have a big advantage. Some do. When that purpose connects with a wide enough audience. But if you're solving problems, which businesses, that's what businesses do, and you're doing well at it, you're going to do well in business. Now, I think the purpose driven side of business. I think it's wildly exaggerated. No one wants to do business with you just because of the purpose. They also want to do business with you because you're solving their problem. So when you have both together, when you have cause-based businesses, okay? Yeah, that will do business with you, not because of that, but also with that's
Mhm.
added. That's the whipped cream on top of the pie.
And for listeners who would like to find out more, connect with you, get a copy of your book, where would you recommend they head to?
So it's available everywhere books are sold. I also have a gift for this podcast. It's primalstorytelling.com/podcast. And you can go on there and you can get a digital copy of the book and 7 video bonuses that kind of help you put you on the fast track to getting this implemented.
Terrific. We'll include a link in that. Is there a social handle that you tend to prefer?
I'm mostly on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram a little bit. So it's just Anthony L with an L Butler.
I think we'll include links to that as well. Anthony, this has been very fascinating. Enlightening. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.